destroys the conversation.
Richard's justification.
No.
You said it, right?
These are some numbers.
Right.
Is that cell phone correct?
But let's discuss that when we get there.
I'll try to get it, so you
Okay. Good morning, members. It is 4 a.m., July 16th. I would like to call this regular CUC Board Meeting to order. Riley, if you could call the roll, please.
Chairman Alan Perez.
Present.
Vice Chair Donald Trump.
Here.
Secretary Roseman Sword.
Here.
Assistant Chair Franco Boloman.
Excuse.
Member Simon Sanchez.
Attending virtually.
Member Becca White.
Present.
And Member Pamela Gonia.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. We have 6 members present for today's meeting.
Okay, so with 6 members present, we do have a quorum to conduct today's meeting. But before we go on, I just want to inform all of our members that on Tuesday, I was informed by one of our board members, Rufo Magnus, that he has resigned from the board. He has notified the governor. So we now have 7 members until the governor appoints and the Senate confirms a member to replace Rufo. I did express to him that, we enjoyed, him working with us, his financial background, his professionalism, and his knowledge of CUC's finances. Being a former CFO was a great help to us, but we also respect his decision and just wish him well. With that being said, we have our agenda in front of us. Can I have an adoption to?
Motion.
Okay, so there has been a motion to adopt today's agenda,
Second.
and it has been seconded. Any discussion or amendments to today's agenda? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. We have adopted today's agenda. We will now go to item D of our agenda, adoption of minutes. In your packet, you have the June 11th, 2026 regular board meeting minutes. We have the June 25th, 2026 special board meeting minutes for your review. I'm assuming that everybody has a chance to review those. I would like to ask for a motion to adopt the minutes for June 11th, 2026 and June 25, 2026. It has been
Seconded.
moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the board meeting minutes? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. We will now go to item E on the agenda, which is correspondence. You guys have that all in your packet. Do you have any comments or on any of the correspondence that have been presented to this board from any of the members? If not, I'd like to make one comment. Within your packet, I'm sure a lot of you guys could see that on July 3rd, the correspondence did come to me referencing a meeting that I had and a possible solution. I want to bring this to the attention of the board and then also give legal the opportunity to comment on it. But just to give you a little bit of background, when we were discussing within the board the opportunity to finance, I have been asked by a couple people to sit down and understand a little bit more as to what our intentions are. Obviously, our intention is to find a way for CUC to obtain financing in order for us to fund the typhoon recovery. It's very clear that we do not have the internal funds to fund the tens of millions that we need for the typhoon recovery, and we need to seek outside financing. I met with a company, explained that. We talked a little bit about what is the process of an IPP. It pretty much ended there, and then this correspondence, this letter came back to us. I just want to be completely transparent and clear to everybody that at this point, I know that there's always questions at the board level as to what is considered an unsolicited proposal, and then how do we address these type of proposals that come into the board. And with that, I would just like to ask Mike if you could just give us a quick overview. We don't have to go into this in too much detail, But in general, what is considered an unsolicited proposal, and then how do we normally, or how do you advise the board to deal with these type of proposals?
Thank you. Yeah, I skimmed the letter, and it's clear to me that this is what I would deem an unsolicited proposal. It's my opinion that the board acts as a board, and any discussion with any individual member is not in any way a solicitation of any bids or RFPs. The board doesn't do that. The board has promulgated procurement regulations, and the only time that bids are solicited are when the director and his procurement team solicit bids through ITB or an RFP, or sometimes they go out and they seek quotes. So that's a solicited bid or proposal. Anything other than that is unsolicited. This letter is an unsolicited proposal. It references a meeting with one of the members, but that is no, in my opinion, the board did not solicit this, and management, to my knowledge, has not solicited this. My advice is that anytime a proposed vendor, either bidder or proposer, does contact a board member individually, that they should email the director and just forward any conversation to the director, and his people can determine if it's something that is in CUC's best interest to pursue. Again, the board is the appellate body for procurement protests, and so it's best not to get involved with proposers at any level. You can't stop people from coming up to you and talking to you. You can't stop the governor from calling you into a meeting and saying, hey, I'd like you to meet this people. I think that's we all know how that works. But I think the point is that the board does not act through any one member, even if it is respectfully a member of the executive board, the chairman or vice chairperson. That's not a board action, and so there's been no official solicitation. So my advice is just to, when this happens, do exactly what the chairman did, make it public, put it in to the entire board. If this is something the board wants to consider, then the board will put it on the agenda, discuss it, and consider it. Incidentally, this is a request for an IPP. There's law definitely involved in this. You can't just, management, in my opinion, could not just accept this. It would be a violation not only of our procurement regulations, but actually Commonwealth law dealing with IPPs. And that's a specific kind of procurement which has been carved out from the normal procurement regulations that we have. It's 4 CMC 8191. So the short answer is this letter is just a letter. The board's free to discuss it. My advice is that the board do nothing or just kick it to management and have management decide if it wants to consider that at this time. Thank you.
Does any board members have any questions, comments, or concerns about this? And if we all agree that let's just send it down to management, have you take a look at it, vet out the situation, and see how you guys want to deal with this letter.
It's just alarming, especially given the previous history that this entity tried to deal with in the previous board and the corporation. So it just raises flags.
All right. So with that, we will now go to part 2 of our agenda, public comments. At this time, we will open up the floor to any members of the public to make comments regarding any of the issues that we will be discussing today on the agenda. And for those of you who do want to make a public comment, just please state your name for the record. And the floor is now open.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Good morning.
members of the board. It's the same old thing. I've been coming here. I just wanted to follow up on the solar. My solar billing. It's already been deducted out of my my monthly billing. So I just wanted to see where it's at now. I've been calling, going to the customer service. Nobody seems to know what's going on. They don't have any idea whether it's being processed or when is the check going to come out. Been very patient. I don't ask for anything, just what they owe me from the public law. I never ask for interest. I understand the process, and we're all hurting. CUC is hurting because of the 2 super typhoon. but it's been going before these two typhoons. So I just want an answer if they're in a process or they're doing something, you know, just something to keep me on the loop of these things here. If I cannot get the refund, then at least something to keep me informed. That's all I ask. Thank you.
So as we are in public comments, we're not going to engage in dialogue, but I will ask either the Chief Financial Officer or our Executive Director to give us an update on the status with the, during their reports today. So
Yeah.
if you have a little bit of time to, you know,
Yeah. Thank you. That's all.
they'll give us a report as to the
Okay.
status of all the,
Good luck.
the net metering refunds and stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm doing my own live stream. Del Benson, as you know, with all due respect to our board members and our director and CFO, this has been a problem for 40 years. And you're at a time when it's like coming down hard because of our years of neglect from our legislature and our people. How many times in the past do people run to the legislature because they can't pay their CUC bill? I mean, I think of the credits and I think the outstanding billing that you have to deal with, and very difficult to disconnect because you get political interference. And so you come with a great handicap. I recognize that. In spite of my criticism, I'm trying to be constructive in how I'm addressing things. And I think a lot of our issues are we're so deep in the hole we don't know what to do, and we think money's going to bail us out. And it may be. But the question is, how are we going to pay it back? We got people saying, go collect from the government. Oh, okay. All right. Government, no more money for a year because we're taking $100 million to pay the bills. That's illogical. But yet, we as a people have accepted that. We haven't held our public officials accountable for what goes on here. Now, and a challenge I have, because I understand and I feel like public comments are a token way for us to vent, and I don't know if anything ever becomes of it, other than we become irritants. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to ask some serious questions. And one is, how are we going to pay for the bill? How are we going to, what is being done to streamline? We, as a Commonwealth, our future forward look is the next election. And we kind of stop there because we're trying to fulfill our immediate needs and not the long haul. And what's really hard when you don't have consistency in fuel rates, you have your own challenge in planning. I understand that. And the question also I throw out is, are there any projections about the loss of revenue that will occur because of all the people, because the rates have gone up? Myself, I'm not using my hot water heater. I haven't run any air conditioning. I've got rid of a freezer. I'm one of many. That's going to drop the usage rates. That's going to reduce how much money is paid to buy fuel, which means the fuel costs are going to go up because you're buying a smaller amount. And with our population on the decline, just talked to a guy, I'm out of here because of lack of jobs, the utilities, and how can we have development for businesses on this island if the utility rates scare people away? And I'm sure you have behind closed doors these kind of discussions. The public is not privy to anything because we have the board and we have the CUC and it ends there. We're not stakeholders. You might say, oh, we are. Go to the, oh, come on. This is political. This is, let's cut through and be honest about it. We as a public really don't have a say. We have to endure what happens. And sometimes it's like, I don't know what to do, so let's look like we're doing something. What are the options we have? Have we compared ourselves to a similar utilities operation in the States? Compare their manpowering and what they do compared to what we do here. And so there's a lot of questions I have. And you guys are in a horrible spot. I understand that. I still stand by my premise as far as my argument about solar power. I mean, how many people lost panels from this? What is the impact of that? I do not think. And we need to look at what is being done elsewhere. Why are they cutting back? We're going to have to hunker down. People don't understand where we're at. We're in such a deep mess in the CNMI, and it's just not the utilities, but you're a foundational side of it. Our economic development is nil. We don't have businesses coming in, and without the outside money, we trade dollars and dimes until we deplete ourselves. And so these are some very serious things we have to look at and deal with. But you really are a foundation for development. And you're in a tough position, but I think, and maybe you put it out there, and I haven't seen it, how we're going to pay for $40 million as things decline and continue to go down. How much is that going to increase the rates? People think it's magic, don't raise the rates. Well, fuel costs are going up. And the amount of fuel is probably your most heavy thing. You could probably lay off half the people, and it still doesn't touch what the fuel costs do. But the tightening of the belt has got to be done. An evaluation has got to be done if there's going to be any trust. And you guys are in the management shoes. The buck stops with you. It stops with the board. The legislature can talk about things, and the Senate, and not do anything for years. And so we're at a precipice. We have to make some hard decisions. And I don't know, maybe 40 million in debt and increased costs and everything might be the answer. I don't know. I'm just having questions because we're at a horrible spot and you guys are in a horrible position and you take all the blame, but it's not all your part. It's the board. It's past boards, it's our government, it's our people. The government chose not to pay its bills for years. Well, I hope they're paying their bills now. And I hope that you're getting a system to where if the department doesn't pay, you cut them off just like you do customers. And people scream in the legislature, well, wait a minute. Priorities. So those are my public comments. Again, I sometimes feel like I'm talking to an empty room because we don't make comments to public comments. We don't call. We don't have a PIO that can send messages and help deliver what's going on. Our public response is our media. And that's why some of us do live streams and try and get the word out there so people are engaged. They don't just sit back and complain and do nothing. They have to be engaged to understand what we're dealing with here. And yes, it's hard to understand the complexity of the utility. Everybody looks at the price. That's what they gauge it on. And you have to look at price, costs. You have a lot bigger picture to run. But I think there's some revamping. I think we need to go private. Guam did it. I mean, we hear about the greatness of Guam. Well, they went not just solar, and how did that go with the storm? They went with private. They have very few in their utilities company, and most of it has been leased out or rented or other people managing the power. I think CUC needs to do that. Thank you.
The floor is still open for anybody else with public comments. If not, we will then move on to item 3 of our agenda. Yes? Okay, sure.
So, first I want to thank the Senate for the recent hearing. I think I found that very informative session, and they had a lot of great questions and suggestions. But what's really bothering me is, and anybody can chime in if they want, nobody in this room, at this table, is telling the public to go F themselves. Nobody. We're finding solutions. It's not a popular solution, but it's a solution. We're trying to make this work. Another thing, Pura Patso put Taza collection. We have two. We just did it recently, like how many months ago? SOF and SA for OMB came and sat at this table. Same thing with CHC. Management had to go down and they negotiated. Is it sufficient? Probably not. Lombi samzu no, and man mas moklem samzu, man malaki koti, man manongi samzu gimena ni West. 25 hours senior na pasi gimes. It's acceptable, right? Sa no senior, right? Something is better than nothing. Yes, it's the bare minimum, but at least there's movement that we're trying to solve that problem. Pues na parang no siya natsurang palabras dan babarias. Pura potsut. It is published in the paper. It is live. There is work being done. Again, it's not a popular solution, but we're trying to come up with a solution. Do not confuse passion with arrogance and ego, because there's no humility in that. That's what I have to say. I'm not targeting you.
So you, members, and I feel for you, Rebecca, because obviously emotions are running high. And Mr. Benson has some good points. A lot of the stuff that he talked about are stuff that we've addressed many, many times in the past. You know, maybe the public wants to be updated on every single thing we've done. The situation that he asked about in terms of how we're going to pay for this $40 million loan, well, we talked about that in detail with the Senate session. It's very simple, right? We are using this loan specifically for the typhoon recovery, which then once we expend the money, then we file for reimbursements with FEMA, we get the money from FEMA, and then we pay back the loan. So the cost is going to be the interest that we incur. So, you know, you're right, Rebecca. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that, you know, I don't know, maybe we sit here and we don't do anything, we don't think through stuff. We have our consultants online. We have Simon, who's from Guam, who's been doing this for 25 years. I'm not exactly sure how you're going to convince the community that we're doing what we're supposed to do, right? And, you know, does it require each of us to meet with every member of our community and tell them exactly what we do every day? I don't think that's practical, right? We like you said, we have a public forum here. We do have our PIO office. Obviously, right now, everything is focused on the typhoon recovery because that's what people want to know, so we go that way. The problem that we have is we are limited to what we're allowed to do by statute. It's really that simple. And I think the public, you know, I'm not, again, I don't want to point fingers, but if you really bring this now, we're in order for us to move forward. Some kind of authority. Of getting the legislative authority to borrow, there's only one question that has to be asked, is by all our leaders, by Mr. Benson, tell us exactly how are we going to fund this typhoon recovery, right? Nobody wants to answer that question. I've asked that question personally to many people in the public over the last week. Now, we have been asking for this authority since April. We have actually been asking for this authority since the fuel price went up at the end of March. So this is not new, right? And again, we've exhausted everything that we've tried to do in terms of working with our vendors, in terms of talking for the grants, our grantors, maybe in terms of reallocating the use of funds. But it all boils down that how do you expect us to fund something that's going to cost maybe even close to $100 million? And the public wants to know, how are we going to streamline? Well, we've got CPUC on video, right? They're virtually. They are asking the same questions. In fact, they're vetting us as we speak. So I welcome everybody to go to the CUPC meetings and listen to the 200 RFAC questions that they're asking us in terms of how we run our, you know, the utility company, right? They are going through an exhaustive research in terms of our bait rate petition. So, and they're the regulators. So if you have a question in terms of our operations, well, they're doing their job and they're going through it. In fact, some of us think maybe a little overboard, but it's fine. I mean, they're answering the questions that the public want to hear. Again, we could deflect this situation all we want. Comes back to the one basic question. Everybody calls us on a daily basis. And I'm from Tinian, I get calls all the time, but I don't even know from Saipan how many calls you guys get as to when power's gonna go up, right? And the financial situation in terms of how to fund this is not new. But again, and no offense, Mr. Benson, you like to come up here and you like to say your piece, but I would love to have you say your piece in terms of how do you expect us to finance this? If you don't want us to borrow money, then put something else on the table, and then we'll entertain it. But why is it that not one individual in this entire community has been able to put something on the table to tell us how are we going to finance this? We've asked FEMA if they could advance some of the funds. We've asked FEMA if they could contract directly with the vendors, right? Those haven't been approved yet. So my question is what do you guys know that we don't know that's going to be able to solve this solution so we could bring the 3,800 accounts on Saipan back up and possibly the 1,000 accounts on Rhoda, right? We're so willing to infight, right? We're so willing to disagree. We're so willing to deflect off of the main issue. And right now, for me, there's only one issue. This typhoon recovery and making sure that we keep these lights on. And all of that other stuff, you can say what you want. You can deflect all you want. That's fine, right? If you want to have an offline conversation, I'll sit down with the offline conversation as long as it's targeted to this subject. And I have no problems with that. But if it's not targeted to this subject, which is the priority today, then we're going to have that conversation later. You want to talk about solar? You can talk about solar all you want, but I'm not going to talk about solar right now until I figure out how to keep CUC solvent and how to fund this typhoon recovery. And that's my position. And if you disagree with it, then that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I have a responsibility here. I know exactly what my responsibility is. I'm going to focus in on that, and I'm going to move forward. And I'll deal with all the noise, and I'll deal with all the politics and everything that comes my way. But eventually, our people, you guys out there in the public, you're going to question not only CUC, but you're going to question all of us. You're going to question everybody in terms of how did we fail our community for letting, the power utility fail. And then we don't have any power. And these people in Saipan right now that haven't had power for 90 days, what if you don't have power for 9 months? Then what are we going to tell our people? But anyway, I'm sorry about this. I know that I'm riding on your coattails in terms of your comments and everything like that. And yes, emotions are high with the board because, again, people love to attack us, and that's fine. We're public employees. We're public figures. It's part of the job, and that's fine. And every now and then we have the opportunity to say our side of it. I've told everybody this. I am not going to engage in a social media debate on any of these issues. Right? If you want to address the issues in a professional manner, we'll sit down and talk about it. And this is one reason why I do thank the Senate for welcoming us in, asking us specific questions about it. It's a professional setting, professional venue. We sit there, they ask us what's going on with the recovery, what's going on with our financing, and then we could address it. Now, again, I was asked the other day, well, what about all those other things? What about the fact? What about this audit situation? And I said, unfortunately, the priority today has to be the funding for the recovery. And what's the problem is we like to put that on the table and everybody else likes to talk about everything else, right? So we put the apples, they don't want to talk about the oranges. Well, unfortunately, this is what we're going to talk about today. Let's figure out how to fund the recovery. Let's figure out how to keep CUC solvent, and then all of those other issues. We could talk about them simultaneously, but they're still not going to be a higher priority than those two issues. With that said, let's move through the agenda, and we'll go ahead and give Kevin the opportunity to give you a report. Kevin.
Good. Thank you, Chairman Perez, and board members, board of directors. Yeah, I open up my executive report by stating how diligently staff have been working in water, wastewater, power to restore, all the utilities to the citizens of Saipan, Tenya, and Rhoda. And they've made tremendous progress. And, the day after the storm in Rhoda, we had our maintenance people down there, and they restored water the same day. And in Saipan, we've restored 100% of the water to the public. And we're working toward that same goal with the power. We have now 41 megawatts of available power at Power Plant 1. Enough to power everything that we have here, more than what we had pre-storm. That's due to the diligent work of our mechanics and manager and operators of the power plant. They've done a remarkable job. We've had Guam Power Authority, thankfully they were here helping us to restore power. And they had to leave to take care of their own island. And we're talking with them to come back to help us in our restoration efforts. We have, the mechanics in Rhoda right now, replacing a radiator, replacing a turbocharger and engine, set up blowers and heaters. We're just waiting for FEMA to hook up a generator so that it can power our blowers and heaters. Our resident manager has stated that he thinks we can have that power plant up and running in 2 to 3 weeks once we energize the blower and heaters. That's remarkable. It had extensive water damage, but they megged it and have very high confidence that it's doable. And they've already repaired the transmission and distribution lines up to the mayor from Power Plant 1. And, looking at 2 months at the most to complete the whole island. They have two augers, 2 trucks, and or 2 bucket trucks and an auger to do the work with 2 crews. We are looking at sending some of our staff from Saipan down. I don't know if everybody knows, but there's no hotel rooms available. So our staff are sleeping on cots in the power plant and in the offices. The one staff member that went and stayed in the hotel doesn't have a generator. So he said it's dinner by candlelight and no screens on the windows. So, to keep the bugs out. They're sacrificing for the community, and they are making progress. We are looking at asking if Guam can deploy their crew here again to take up where they left off, and we will free up some of our bucket trucks to send to Rhoda to help expedite the recovery there. Tinian is doing good. I understand the airport now has power, so they're making progress there. The 249 is going to be pulling out in another month, so we have to have a solution there. And we're discussing with FEMA, the alternatives. Is it 1.8 engines that are used in odor and will take more maintenance, or is it better to contract with a vendor that will meet current EPA air emissions and be more reliable and take less fuel? So we're studying all possibilities and see what's best for the long term. The recommendation for long-term in tenure is not to rebuild the existing plant, but to replace it with new structure and new. That will take 4 to 7 years. So we have to have an interim solution. And, everything is being cost-benefit analysis. The best procedure going forth. Many very smart minds, from FEMA to the Department of Energy to CUC and other consultants are all getting involved. So I have confidence that we're coming out of this good, maybe even better than before the storm. And there are sacrifices we'll have to make in the interim. So that's what I have. If you have any questions or.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Lately, they've been seeing a lot of comments about water billing, and I know in my situation, an immediate family member of mine got billed for $4,000 of water, but we didn't have water. So maybe you or maybe CFO can touch up on that, like how did people get billed that much when there was no water during Sinlaco? Is it a meter
Should be
malfunction?
meter malfunction, could be many things.
Okay. It's just like when I saw the bill, I was
I'm not
like,
aware of that situation.
I wasn't aware of it either.
yeah,
I know we've repaired a lot of leaks on both our side and the customer side. So I'm not saying it is, but it's possible that a leak occurred on their side. You know, they didn't put that water to beneficial use, but it could have gone through the meter. And we've helped customers identify that. If we see that and customer may not even be home, we will turn that off or cut and cap and give the customer notice. Ideally, that should have flagged, you know, a $4,000 bill and an investigation done. And we, you know, Betty and I will look at it with our staff. And you know, I encourage anyone, especially during these times, to bring those issues to us so we can respond to it and take care of it.
So do we have sufficient accounting staff to just focus in on billing issues? Because I know there's going to be a lot through this recovery. How do we work through that? And you're right, Rebecca, it's crazy, right? Because a lot of people want to call the board members. I don't even know how billing works here. Obviously, you say call the management, but of course they're working on call staff, they're working on recovery, so they don't get answers, and then everybody gets all upset. I mean, obviously, this is an issue that we're going to have to figure out. It's not going to be a simple issue because it requires manpower, but let's just try and figure out a system in terms of how we could address all the billing issues, because we know that there's going to be billing issues, whether it's faulty meters, whether it's the counting system. I know for Tinian, you're probably going to have a challenge because, you know, that whole situation in terms of paying for the fact, not paying for the fact, or whatever, has to be confusing in terms of modifying the accounting system or the billing system.
Sylvie, the billing system is just recuperating from all this disaster. And the meter readers were first assigned to help with power to start pulling meters. So they didn't do readings till about a week again after that. And so what the billing staff has to do is prorate the usage so it falls within the regulatory requirement of 32 days, between 20 to 32 days. The more complicated part was, the storm happened in April, and we didn't get back to work until second week of May, till it was safe to come back, right? And also to give the employees time to also recover and fix their homes and whatever other disaster issue they had. And so when the staff came back, I worked closely with them, and it was challenging to determine how we could make it work, because the system that we use doesn't know that there was a typhoon and that there was no power for so many days and no water and all that. So we had to manually review almost each account, kind of like skim it, and it looks in line. The first bills that went out latter May, when they came back, were actually for bills that were pre-storm. And it covered some of the outage period. So we had to make sure that we went in and we trunked the readings to be the blackout date. So that's something we went in and did that. To every meter, we put April 14, which is the date, type, and Antinian blacked out. Because it doesn't make sense to bill any more days. If there was an estimate, it'll cut off that date. An estimate, meaning estimate pre-storm, because there's a bad dog, there's a car covering the meter, or whatever it is, right? And our rules allow us to estimate. So we did that manually for the pre-storm bills, and so the bills didn't go out to around end of May and early June. And so when people started to get it in June, they were like, I still don't have power and I'm getting a bill. But did not look at the date of the reading that it's pre-storm. And so when they come in and explain it, they're like, oh, okay, so this is before the storm. And we're like, that's your usage before the storm. And so now then the next bill is after the storm, and that became even more crazy. I really felt for the billing staff. So we authorized them to work late, we needed to get the bills out to get revenue in. And so they worked late hours because they had to prorate it to when the area was energized. So they were working with power division, getting the laterals, when did the laterals go up, and they were starting that now as the reading date going forward. So that the May 15 fact rate that was passed in the middle of the month, which we normally don't do that, can prorate accordingly. Because if you don't do that, and you have a lot of usage before May 15 and you only start at a certain date, most of your usage will be billed at the higher rate and vice versa at the lower rate. So, and we made decisions like less than 200 kilowatt hours, don't worry about it. If the rate's lower, give it to them. We've got to move. Don't spend too much time on customers that use less than 200. Customers use more than 200, and the 200 was determined by how many accounts are we looking at under 2 or under 3, under 4. And it was to be able to meet deadlines. The staff said 200 and down, allow us to like not even look at it because it was to their benefit anyway. So we made that decision. And so they've just caught up with the full cycle of billing for June, I believe, around July 2nd. And then Bobby hits. And so now they're set back a little. It's really the system that prorates, right? So Bobby wasn't too bad because we recovered on Saipan, pretty quickly. But those are the issues that the billing staff have to go through to get the bills out the door. And so now it's customer service and billing working hand in hand. And I believe on some of the bills, they would put notes, like please see customer service. And we encourage the call center to, if they feel they have concerns with their bills, to please come and see customer service so we could help them, if it needs an adjustment. And so the staff are trained to do the adjustments. They know what they're doing. I think the issue was getting through the lines. That was a challenge. So I even had a legislator offer some of his staff to help out. But having to train them again on how to use the system, what's going on at CUC, it's going to take more than so I said what we did was we then took 3 people from customer service downstairs. We said if it's not that busy in physical visits, then put them on the call center calls. So we only have 6 lines that can answer the call center, which is a queue process. But we have 1 answering saying, let me refer you to a customer service rep, and transfers right away to the next customer service. And they can see on their phone who's offline, so they make that transfer to that person. And so the calls go faster, come in a little faster. Unfortunately, I think it's really the calls that are coming in for the most part is really the 4,000 customers that don't have power who continue to say, when is my power going to come up? Or what's going on? I'm waiting, it's been 2 weeks, and they just continuously follow up. And I don't blame them for continuously following up, but that's what's jamming up the phone line. And so we did talk about perhaps additional advisories to put out, but it'll help a little bit. People want to hear someone on the other line. They don't want to see an advisory. They want to say, well, when is it scheduled, right? And that is the challenge that we're having because we're putting out some schedules, but it's not fast enough for the 4,000 customers that we have that are still not connected.
You only have 1 crew, no?
Going
Night?
out,
Yeah.
no, we have only 1 crew at night,
Right.
but we have 5 crews during the day.
Yeah. For how many customers?
There's still 4,000. The issue with the 4,000 customers is, I think a couple might be laterals, but the transformers arrived yesterday. So now we should be able to get, I heard that we went through 102 transformers in 1 day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that means we're rolling with it. So the
Yeah.
transformers are
That's pretty
going
good.
up. And we have 291 that arrived yesterday. So that should be transferred to our warehouse staging area today, hopefully, if it clears all the clearings. So FEMA is coordinating all the transfers and the clearing, and so they will get it to our warehouse. Hopefully, it's done completely by today. I think there are 291 transformers and about 160. I might be wrong on that, but on the poles, concrete poles.
And there's still more
And
coming.
there's still more wooden poles coming to, like 300 some wooden poles. As the materials come in, power will go up, but it's at a sneller pace now because we have less manpower. GP has demobilized, and they're still dealing with restoration there. The director has communicated with GPA, and we're putting in a letter to follow up with that, to request for assistance, and
And we will have to order more transformers, because all of those that
Yes.
we've gotten, that's all that, and we've identified more after the second storm, so.
yes. So we've identified additional transformers that are really from Sinbla Cruz damages. Just kind of like Bobby helped us identify them because the way they were damaged, it shows that it has to be a bigger storm than Bobby on Saipan. And then we have to add now the transformers and the poles and the hardware for Rhoda. We're still waiting for the hardware for Saipan. There's still 3 other material deliveries that we haven't received, and we haven't even ordered another 10 million maybe of materials, I think, for what we need on Saipan. We're just temporary recycling stuff, but it won't last long.
Right. And
But
just-
that has not been
Right.
awarded yet because we don't have the funds.
Right, so just for all the members to note, and what Betty's talking about, is we did put out an RFP, almost like a wraparound service, to fix the transmission and distribution,
And to include some materials.
and
right?
to include some
Yeah.
materials. So it's gone through the process for a company to just come in and take care of that whole process. But like she said, unfortunately, we don't have the funding to execute. We've gone through the process of having it ready. If the funding becomes available, if we're allowed to, borrow and get that funding available, then we could execute on that, and then that would make the recovery on Saipan and Rhoda much faster. But without that, then unfortunately we have to piece this thing out and slowly get the materials in. We don't have the manpower, so that's the situation that we're in. But Miranda, you had some comments?
Yes, that did CUC offer any disconnections at all for the past few weeks?
Yes,
So we did some disconnections
we are.
on customers.
We just started 3 weeks ago, maybe, when majority of the laterals went up. And so we gave people time to recover, and also to make sure that we sent proper notices out. And so the notices that went out would have been for pre-storm charges.
Okay. But
And
none
so
for the-
after we got back on our billing cycle and we realized that there's still people who are not paying, then we had to send the notices out. So it was hard to generate disconnect notices because the system again doesn't know whether you have power or not. It doesn't automatically turn you off in the system. So some people may have had notices and are making a big deal about it, saying, I don't even have power yet, and they're already issuing me a disconnect notice. Well, it's telling you that if you don't pay your pre-storm bill and you get power up, you might go off or not go up, right? So those are some of the things that, I think customers were given enough time since the storm to recover and pay
Okay.
some of that money.
Chair, no, I had mentioned in our previous meeting also, for our customers out there who have concerns about their billings, please come and visit our office. If you're relying on the phones to be answered, we can't. Back in COVID, when we had that COVID, we had a large number of customers lining up. If we have the customers come in, I'm pretty sure they're going to understand your billing, what is happening. But if you go out in social media and say this and that, an old man once said, let us teach each other instead of tapan ais fanta, tapan apanyagui. Do not scare each other. Let us come in and work with our CUC staff and try to figure out what is going on with your billing system. Do not go out and spread rumors out in the public. The $7 that is being mentioned that they're being billed, they should understand that the $7 is for the service fee. It doesn't mean that just because we are in restoration, we're going to scrap that $7. We have to continue paying for that $7 service fee. It doesn't matter whether we are in pre-storm, pre-disaster, or post-disaster. So I encourage all the communities out there, if we can go to the nap and line since 8 o'clock in the evening until the next day, why can't we go to CUC and line up and try to figure out our billing? It doesn't hurt you to come in and understand the billing cycle. Let us not scare each other. Let's work together. So that's what I'm asking the community. Come in and understand the billing cycle. And if you have problems with your billing cycle, CUC will work on it. But how can we know if you're just relying on the system to answer your calls? And then when your calls are answered, you get frustrated. Why? Because you don't have the answer that you want. But if you come in and you see a customer representative and they show you what is happening with your billing system, you would understand it. And of course, you're going to be satisfied. And going back to the media, I know Director White is very upset with what has been going on. For the 40 years that I have been associated with Rhoda, I have been in the political system for more than 40 years. I have never come across any legislator using vulgar language to the community. In one point, you applaud our CUC personnel. They are out there. They are sacrificing. Betty mentioned yesterday about cutting their meals, and Kevin, if I'm not sure which of you two, cutting the meals for our line crew. Do we want to get rid of another hour for them not to go out and assist the public because they have to go home and eat? But one side, we criticize CUC. On the other side, we applaud CUC. What is it? What do you want? Do you want to work with us? Do you want us to go back, restore everything? You know, my son is with CUC. He's in Rhoda. He doesn't have time to go to his house and fix his house. Why? Because he is committed to going out and restore the community of Rhoda. He's been to Tinian. He's been to Tinian to help, but had to go back home and prepare his family for the typhoon. And I am very fortunate that his house was not damaged because it gave him the opportunity to go out and help others that have experienced those damages. It doesn't mean that just because you're a lineman, you're a CUC personnel, you're gonna throw the community's problems out there, disaster out there, because you're gonna go to your family first. No, your family comes last. So I do not appreciate any legislator going out there and using those vulgar language, telling us to F ourselves. If you're telling us to F ourselves, that is CUC. It doesn't matter whether it's linemen, the board, the management. You say F you. So F you attains to all the CUC corporation. And again, we are Team CUC. We have tried our very best to go out and help the community. Our staff have been working so many hours out there. Now, you're talking about cost-cutting measures. Some of this staff do not earn any restoration pay, those that are exempt. But yet they are out there working their ass off. I will say that now, ass off, trying to help the community of Rhoda, Saipan, and Tinian. So what I would like to hear the community say, thank you, CUC, for going out there and trying your best. Trying your best to bring back our community. It's not going to be as is as post-typhoon, of course, because we have a lot of damages. But at least we have something comfortable coming to our houses. So again, if you have concerns with CUC, come in and see our pertinent staff. Do not go out there and badmouth CUC and tell us to F ourselves. I do not appreciate that. And definitely we are not on this table trying to F ourselves, because we are working hard to come to any solutions. Since the beginning of the of the no legislators, no, I would say, since they had elected him into the legislator. What has he done? What has he done to help CUC? He's just out there bad-mouthing CUC. And where is he now? Does he come to our meetings? Or does he come to the office to try to sit down? No. Why? Because he feels that the community out there needs to hear himself. Well, I'll say that why don't you F yourself, because you are not doing anything to support the community. And I ask all the other House members to please sit down and talk this over and help CUC come to a solution. I really appreciate the Senate because they are trying their very best. But the House, I urge all the House members to sit down and look at what is happening, not only to Saipan, even Rhoda, Tinian, and Saipan. We are one. We are resilient. But how can we be resilient if we have legislators out there bad-mouthing us? So again, we need your help. Let's sit down and work this out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, member. And again, as everyone could see, I think this is just a culmination of all of the frustration that management and the board is going through. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we're the easy target, but I like what you said the most when you said on one hand, they praise their linemen for working around the clock. Even myself, you know, the other day, last Saturday, it was starting to rain, it was dark, and the linemen were up, you know, hooking up stuff, right. But on the flip side, then we're so easy to criticize that the first thing out of everybody's mouth is, oh, you need to cut your staff. Well, so who are we going to cut, right? Do we cut the linemen? Do we cut the meter readers who are now doing the ground service? Do we cut the customer service or the accounting who now they're complaining about the billing? I mean, who, right? So Miranda, I feel you, right? Everything that's coming out there on social media is general, nothing specific. All it is I want you guys to cut. And I've actually heard people say that the reason to cut is so everybody could suffer equally. Well, you know, I mean, come on. We need to really get above that because we have a job. Our job is to restore power. It's really that simple. We're going to do what we need to do. But I feel you and I understand where you're coming from. But with that, I think what we should do now is go into the heart of this and let's figure out financially. We'll move over to our Chief Financial Officer report. And let's find out exactly how our financial situation is currently.
Did he have the rest of our report?
I think
Was
Kevin,
you done?
I think
Done with your
Kevin's done.
report?
Yeah, I would like to add more to what Rebecca stated. Because, you know, every day they were out there finding leaks, not just on the service side, but the customer, and even found water tanks that were overflowing, you know, unbeknownst to the customer. So, Mike, I'd like to look at our regulations for the billing, because usually, you know, what goes through that meter, you have to bill them. But these are extreme circumstances, and most agencies have a method, and I'll get with Betty to see how we can make these adjustments for known, where they didn't actually put that water to beneficial use, but it actually ran over back into the ground.
We have a typhoon policy on water adjustments.
Okay,
So as long as the leak is fixed, if it's on their site, within 30 days, we would credit the charges once they show us that it's fixed.
yeah, and a lot of times
Or
what
we have
what
a-
we did was, you know, if they weren't home and we couldn't notify them, we would go ahead
And do
and
it.
close it off
Yeah.
or
There
cut
is a
it down.
policy that we've been using for past storms.
Okay, good.
To help customers.
So we, you know,
those charges.
and so Rebecca
If it's
knows that
storm
we will
related,
work
yes.
toward that, so these
Okay.
customers aren't
Yeah,
getting
I
$4,000
forgot about that.
bill and,
Yes, Director White, there is a policy that we've been using since Typhoon Sotalor that allows customers to get an adjustment on their water billing if the damages were caused by the typhoon.
I just found out he has an appointment with customer service on Friday.
Oh, okay. So they would probably, yeah.
and, we also had, to bring this to your attention, that we made some major purchases for the restoration efforts. It's in your packet, so. And then you were asking about the memo that I signed that Richard wrote. Yeah, I saw, that should be with IM.
Okay, we should share that for the agenda item on the board.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we could get her to get us that copy and put it in there, so Riley could put it in their package.
And before we go into the Chief Financial Officer report, just want to remind everybody, you know, a lot of times people accuse us of not putting out information. Well, as everybody knows, we get an Executive Director report, we get a Chief Financial Officer report, we share this with all our stakeholders. The Executive Director's report is in your packet, it's 82 pages long. It covers literally everything. We're going to send it to the Governor's office, we're going to send it to the Delegate's office, we're going to send it to the House, we're going to send it to the Senate, we're going to also send it to CPUC. And, you know, it's up to them to how they digest the information and what they, but the information's there. It pretty much covers everything that we do on a monthly basis. And just want to let all the members know that, you know, with this week, we started this process, I think, a month or two ago to give all our stakeholders the information. So it's there for their, to address it.
Am I instructed to release the reports?
Absolutely. They're public information. We don't, I mean, people want to know what's going on with CUC, then this is what's going on. I just want to make sure that you review it before you send it out, that if there's any information that needs to be redacted for any legal reasons, then let's redact it and then let's send them out.
And we still continue those press briefings weekly.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Kevin, thank you. And you and your staff for doing those press briefings. I mean, we have the press behind you. Media, please, if you need to meet with our staff, you know, call them up, and if they're not engaging, let me know, and I'll make sure that they engage. But absolutely, you know, a lot of times it's better to hear it in person than to just read these little snippets of information. So let's continue that. You know, let me be very clear in terms of how I say this. A lot of people think is that we're not trying to put out as much information as possible. What people don't understand is when you have a disaster, and this is my third, if not fourth, super typhoon that I've managed on Tinian, information changes constantly and it changes quickly, right? And it's important for us to put out the right information at the right time, and also not to provide false hope. We have to put out facts and making sure that people understand that. And that's what I believe management is doing. Now, of course, we will never satisfy the community because the community individually wants to be contacted and informed as to how it's going to affect them personally. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. We just cannot do that. Betty said there's 3,800 or 4,000 accounts still in Saipan. We have 1,000 accounts still in Rhoda. You know, we do our best to put out information based upon the status at that time. You know, whether it's through the press hearings or press media hearings, or whether it's through this meeting, or, you know, when we meet at the Senate. But it's not that we don't want to put out information, but we want to make sure that we put out good, current information that you know, people can rely on. With that being said, let's now go to the Chief Financial Officer report, because I got a feeling that this one's going to be a little lengthy. Eddie?
Financial statements, my highlights will cover today's financial statements for the month ended May 31, 2026, and makes comparison with financial information for the same period of the previous year, 2025. These statements begin to show the significant impact of typhoons and Laku on CUC's finances as of May 31. In summary, it shows asset declines, increased liabilities, and a negative net position, with revenue shortfalls across power, water, and wastewater. Expenses rose mainly in salaries, depreciation, and maintenance, while non-operating income improved. Cash flow remains tight, and budget variances highlight significant underperformance in revenue and over expenses, indicating an immediate need for financial adjustments, liquidity, and some strategic planning. There was a significant decline in operating revenues. Total operating revenues for May 2026 were $54.9 million, a decrease of $9.3 million, 14% compared to the same period last year. However, this is primarily due to the lower FAC charges. But the non-fuel portion for power, water, and wastewater revenues were down about $3 million. This decline directly impacts the corporation's ability to cover non-food expenses and invest in infrastructure. There was an increase in operating expenses and loss from operations. Operating expenses rose by almost $5 million to $75.9 million, driven by personnel costs, mainly caused by typhoon and premium pay and benefits, general administrative costs, mainly restoration related, and maintenance and depreciation. As a result, the loss from operations widened to a negative $25.15 million. CUC's net position remains stable despite losses at the end of May 2026 at $174.6 million, only slightly lower than May 2025 at $174.9 million. This stability is due to capital contributions and federal grants, which partially offset our operational losses. Based on the statement of net position, accounts payable and accrued liabilities for May 2026 increased by $4.4 million, 51%, from $8.4 million in May of 2025 to $12.8 million in May of 2026. This reflects an increased outstanding obligation to vendors and service providers as a result of the disaster caused by Typhoon Sinlaku. It also means delayed payments and cash flow challenges if we do not increase our cash liquidity. Net utility plant and administrative equipment increased by $5 million, showing ongoing investment in infrastructure. However, construction in progress decreased slightly, indicating that we have slowed down and have completed some of our major projects. The FY 2026 budget variants highlight revenue shortfalls and cost savings. Actual operating revenues were about $51.6 million below budget, while total expenses were $39.04 million below budget. However, the largest revenue shortfall is because the FAC was projected higher because at the time of the budget, the fuel cost was much higher than what it is after the year started. Consequently, though, the cost savings were achieved in production fuel and some in personnel maintenance. However, that savings does not offset the revenue decline, non-fact revenue decline. CUC's cash on hand as of May 31, 2026 was $46.7 million. Of that amount, $34.9 million is restricted. CUC's financial statements show that the net cash provided operating activities were negative at $2.58 million, indicating that CUC is not generating enough cash from its core operations to cover expenses. The ending cash and cash equivalents were $46.7 million, with a significant portion, $34.92 million, being restricted funds for grantors, local appropriations, ARPA monies, award monies for specific projects, including $17.4 million for stipulated order tasks and water O&M settlement funds, and $12.7 million in customer security deposits. Although unrestricted, the remaining cash of $11.7 million is already appropriated or obligated for vendor payments, including fuel and loop payments, contract obligations, approved purchase orders, encumbrances, and payroll. Today, those unrestricted funds that have already been committed are being reprioritized for the most part to pay for the restoration expenses. Bottom line, we don't have liquidity. CUC is cash poor. We will continue to prioritize strategies to increase our revenues, improve our collections, and manage cash flow while continuing to seek external funding and monitor expense controls. With a significant increase in expenses as a result of Typhoon Sinlaku and Bavi, more attention is needed to managing our payables and ensuring sufficient unrestricted liquidity for operations. Other items. Net metering reconciliation is still ongoing with a little over 120 accounts left to reconcile. However, the process was interrupted by the disaster. The staff resumed operations on May 6, but due to the typhoon and the administrative leave placed on the employees, the billing operations became the priority once we resumed office, requiring diversion of staffing to assist in the manual reviews and edits of the thousands of meter readings and prorating of consumptions due to two-fact rates were effective in a given month and the staggered energization of the accounts. Our goal is still aiming to complete the reconciliation of all net meter accounts by August 15. As for the payout of net meter credits, I am informed that we have another set of payout credit packages that are ready for check processing. This would be the third batch of checks. Restoration. Our highest peak load post-typhoon is now at 28.8 megawatt on July 14, as of July 14, 2026. And I will discuss the concerns in that later on under the temporary. It's not on the agenda. Maybe we could put it there. In addition to the temporary power plant for Tinian, we can discuss, it would be a similar subject, the need to continue to extend the additional 6 megawatt units at the Saipan power plant because of the megawatts that we're at now, the capacity that we're at now. Restoration pay has decreased from 490 to 300,000 per pay period. There is some cost savings in that GPA has demobilized, but it does not help our cash situation. Reduction in restoration hours. There is a new directive that will go out for a reduction in restoration hours today. As Kevin and I had discussed, that we would reduce hours to 10 hours a day from 14 to 16 hours that they were performing earlier. So their hours used to go from 6 to 9 and sometimes 10. Now we will reduce it from 7:30 to 5:30. They will work straight to lunch if they bring their lunch with them, as we have also indicated that meals will no longer be provided. That cost savings would be about 60 to 70,000 per pay period for just restoration pay alone.
So that slows down.
That will slow down restoration. Yes.
I think one of the questions that is on a lot of people's minds is payroll next week. Do we have enough to meet it, and does that include the restoration?
As I reported back on June 26, I have done some updating, but not much has changed for July. We will still be cashless by the end of the month. What the accounting department just did was hold back what's already very critical to pay. We had made one Agreco payment, but we had 4 invoices already, 4 months. I spoke to the Agreco last night, and they are understanding, but they need some of that payment to come through. So I committed we would make the other 2 that should have went out last week. With that and the restoration payments that are coming up already, because we're past the 60 days that we agreed for some of the restoration contracts, we have to make those payments, or else they might pull out. They might retract their rentals. They might. GPA, we have not made any payment to GPA. I have requested for GPA to give us a 3 to 5 month extension, and I know John Beneventi said they would consider it, but we have not gotten a response.
GPA approximately?
The last
5 million.
the last invoices, which was not for the month of June, only up to May, was already at 12 million.
Oh,
Which included materials and the rentals of the equipment. We got a good amount of materials from GPA. We got a second order from GPA. And so that does not include the labor hours, which is at 55 employees additional. That was we paid some critical vendors. We're making small payments. If we have several invoices, we're breaking them up and holding some back. And we are keeping in good communication with our vendors so that they work with us. There are a lot of the vendors that are hurting. Economy's not good, so we've used their services. We need to get that payment out. But the fuel purchases, payroll, our IPP, and our restoration contracts that have already come up due are our priorities at this point. But we will run out of cash because what's coming in is not sufficient for what's going to go out. And the impact is partially the reduction in revenue from when we had the blackouts. I mean, we didn't have power come up to the end of April. So from April 12, I mean, we had one facility on for a good week before anybody else started receiving power. And then after that, it was just an increase incrementally. So those without power is where we would shortfall on revenue. And that's just beginning to be realized. And so if you see the highlights, for example, on the financial statements, you'll see that graph there that's very indicative of the impact the storm had on CUC. So I know I have a copy of that report here, but it should be in your packet. On the financial statements, the graph shows a significant, here it is. A significant increase in expenses and a significant drop in revenues. That's just not the way to do business, but that's what it is here. The lines just went up and the other side went down. So, and that continued in May. That's the billings for April. Some of April. So in June's report, you're gonna see the same thing get worse because now it's picking up April and May's billings. So, as I told the Senate yesterday, that there's nothing really to deliberate.
Seriously.
There are 4,000 customers that are with power, and some have moved on to other places temporarily. So maybe we're not hearing 4,000 cry because they've moved and rented rooms elsewhere. The director shared that at his location, he sees one staff with his whole family there. But I know that that staff doesn't live in the same household with his family. He's next door. So it seems like that whole area is without power. And so what I told the Senate was, if we don't get this, if we don't get the loan that we need, the lack of restoration at this point is on them, because that's the only solution right now, is to get that financing. How do we pay it? FEMA is going to reimburse us for for the restoration costs. We've already lost the window of opportunity to get that 100% recovery. It ended on July 11. We've been trying to get this loan since before the storm.
Right.
And then the storm made it more a priority. We have the 90-day window of emergency to get 100% coverage on some of the works we need to do, restoring services.
I missed that.
And now we have to pay a co-share because we didn't get that loan. FEMA reimburses within 60 days to 150 days. It all depends on how soon we also get it in to FEMA. And we have already begun to submit some projects to FEMA that we have covered some expenses for. But it's so minimal compared to the amount that we need. But if we start paying for these costs up front, the sooner we could get it into FEMA for FEMA to give us that money. So as soon as FEMA pays, it doesn't make sense. We have to pay the loan, right?
Right.
Yeah, because that's the reason why we're loading now. We don't have the cash. So we want to get that reimbursement from FEMA so we could pay the loan.
but now we're not getting the whole 100%.
Is that for Sinloco? The July 11
Yes,
date?
Yes,
There's-
July.
They're not doing it for Bobby?
They have not. I spoke to the PAO's office this morning. They just got back from Rota, about 6 of them, and they're now putting an assessment together. If the infrastructure damages
Right.
meet the 1 million threshold, then that goes into FEMA. We wait for the president's declaration.
We haven't gotten that.
We only have the governor's emergency declaration. I don't think we have a declaration from the
From the
president.
No,
president, yeah.
nothing yet.
I think Rhoda alone is over $1 million, so we could claim some of that based on that we're one
Definitely.
CNMI, right? But Bobby's a whole nother process. So
Right.
I'm talking about, let's work on Sinloco.
Right, right.
Because we can then use whatever we're getting back for Sinloco
Right.
also to continue to help Rhoda.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if Bobby would trigger an extension, but now. that
I was
the
hoping it would,
president's- yeah.
but because it's kind of like restoration on top of
Okay,
it,
right.
yeah. I don't know how that would work. Are we asking for it? That's a good question.
I'm
but
sure,
I was-
I'm sure they
yeah,
are asking
yeah.
for it.
Well, we can't rely
So,
on that.
I
Okay,
spoke
so-
to the governor yesterday, and he heard our plea also, and he understands, and he's saying he's gonna see what he can do on his side to push this
So
out.
let's do this, you know, and again, as much as we try to find a solution, and in this case, borrowing, a lot of the pushback comes back from the public, from the leaders, that we have to streamline and we have to cut. Of course, they never ask specifics. Here are the numbers in front of us. I'm just gonna say this, you know, if anybody wants to sit down and tell me exactly where we're gonna cut, then let's sit down and talk about it. But the financials that we have right in front of us, let me show you some obvious things. So first thing, our fuel production, purchasing of fuel. Spent $30 million, we only collected 27 in the fact rate, right? What caused this $3 million deficit? Obviously, that whole situation about having the fact rate
Yeah.
being charged in terms of exactly what the cost of fuel is. That whole process that everybody, the community, our leaders come out and say, oh, we can't raise the fact rate to 44 cents. Well, we still got to buy it at 44 cents. And then we all know that we had 2 purchases at 60 cents when we were down to 44
Yes.
cents. So we were buying at 44 cents when we were at 24 cents. Then we're buying at 60 cents that were at 44 cents.
44.
And what is the impact? $3 million.
Right.
Right? So
And yeah, that is.
that's a fact, right? Nobody ever talks about that. Again, we talked about, so you take a look at our operating expenses, right? Break it down. You take away the G&A that we're using for the recovery. You take away the maintenance that we have to keep the machines up and running. You take away the fuel, and then the salaries of our current employees to address the
Yes.
recovery. So then, what's left? 5% of our budget is left in what? Supplies, other production? I don't know. Where do you want us to cut? Where do you want us to cut within that 5%? And even if you do cut within that 5%, it's nowhere near that's going to address any of the expenses
No.
that we're talking about. So what I'm saying is this: if the leaders and the public really want to come out and address that point, then come in with something a little bit more definitive. You know, I mean, it seems like everybody out there is a financial expert, and everybody out there knows how to address our operations and our finances. You know, if you want to do that, you know, come with something a little bit more credible, or go ask CPUC, you know, what their position is, because they have all our information. They're analyzing everything. In fact, part of their request of their RFI for our base rate, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, was they asked to look at all of our purchases over the last 2 or 3 years, right? So they have
Every
literally
invoice.
every invoice for the last X amount of years that CUC has made. So what more do you want? So, you know, I don't want to pick on you, Mr. Benson, because it's not fair, because it's a one-way conversation. But if you have an issue with it, go talk to your CPUC and ask them what their position is on our situation. Yeah, and in fact, I'm saying this: if you're going to come and talk to me, let's talk specifics, right?
Great.
Because you know, I'm tired of people coming here and saying that, okay, you guys need to cut. Well, tell me where we're going to cut, right? And I don't know what your background is. I don't know if you're a financial expert or anything like that. We have our audited financial statements. They're public. We'll give it to you. You want to
Really commenting?
address those, so be it. But, you know, I don't think that you guys are doing a service to our people by making it seem like we're not doing anything and then bringing up issues that, where's the solution, right? So come in with something a little bit stronger, right? Just don't come up there and make generalizations and say that all of a sudden, because of this, we're going to solve our problems, right? You tell me exactly where we're going to cut here to fund the $75 million of the recovery. That's what you need to come with me. If you could bring that to the table and you could give me that information, then we'll enter into a dialogue. If you want to sit down and talk about solar and everything like that, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to save that for another time. All right? So think about that, and if you're ready to sit down and discuss it, then, you know, I'll sit down and I'll talk to you.
Jerry,
Yeah.
no, I'm just kind of curious. There was mentioned audit. What more audit do they want? Do they want audit of the
Okay, so
employees?
just so
or-
everybody knows, let's
just trying to
put
figure it
this
out.
issue to rest.
Okay.
So they want an operational management audit. Betty said it during the last Senate. We are probably the most audited, regulated agency in the entire CNMI. So just to make everything clear, every single thing that we do when we spend for our grants, which covers water and wastewater, is approved by EPA and the Department of Justice, most of them through the stipulated order, okay? Every purchase that we make over $350,000 has to go through the AG's office and CPUC for approval, right? We do not have the ability to increase our rates without CPUC's approval. We do not have the ability to borrow without CPUC's. So I'm not really sure what exactly they're looking for. I guess what they want to do.
Federal stipulated orders. We
Right.
report to judge,
No, but
federal
Randy,
judge.
you said it.
Yeah.
They're not here in this audience. They don't show up like what Mike was saying when Judge Carter and EPA and Department of Justice come in, and I doubt they show up to the CPUC board meetings either. So where do they get all their information to be an expert in terms of how to manage CUC? And that's what the public
They
needs to
show
start
up, they make
asking our
comments, and
leaders.
then they leave.
Right. So anyway, that being said, does anybody else have any questions or concerns regarding our financial situation?
I just have a comment. So there's a lot of comments about poor proper planning. And there was also a recent comment, the underlying problems that created the underlying financial crisis identified today are corrected and those responsible are held accountable. We can keep pointing fingers back and forth that it was the previous board, the previous management, the previous lawmakers. Some of us inherited this problem. And I'm speaking about both. Some of us are new to this. We're trying to find a solution. What don't you understand about that? If they're not addressing how we are going to fix it, then why are you commenting? Why are you not putting in your expertise? Because we have so much meteorologists.
Yeah.
We're finding a solution to this constant repeat of poor proper planning for a problem that we inherited. We're not going to keep, blame. Forget it. We're way past that. We need to fix it, and we're trying to fix it now. We have a solution. Again, it's not a pleasant solution. It's not a popular solution, but it's a solution.
But just so everybody knows, and we have it on, virtually, you have Simon Sanchez, who's part of the board, right? People say, why don't we use Guam's lead? Well, there's Simon, and he leads us throughout, and he informs us what Guam does and everything like that. And I just wish that we had the political and fortitude to be able to follow Guam's lead, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's the situation right now. But I do thank Simon for the last 3 years in terms of guidance and understanding in terms of everything, incorporating alternative energy, how they handle their billings and all that stuff. But we also have our consultant on the line, right, who advises us. CPUC has their consultant. So it's not like any of the situations not being vetted by professionals. And then, of course, our senior staff has all been vetted by the Department of Justice and EPA.
EPA.
So I'm not really sure what else do they want. It seems like they don't trust our financial audit, who basically audits the entire government. There's only 2 auditors in the CNMI, and I think even in Guam, so I'm not exactly sure who else. But, if our leaders want to spend $1.5 million to do an audit, which I believe is already being happening right now, I think our public should question that. And, maybe we could take that $1.5 million, which we were asking for, to buy new generators, which, like we said during the Senate session, that is the quickest and the easiest way to reduce the cost of fat. It's
What's
really that
the
simple.
source?
But anyway, I think we've said it many times. We don't have to, beat this dead horse in terms of how simple this process is. We try and keep it simple. Everybody tries to make it a little bit more complex, and then unfortunately we confuse our public, and then it's all decided from the public who they want to side with. But without belaboring this issue too much, Betty, did you have any other issues that you wanted to address?
Wait, I have a question.
Sure, absolutely.
What's the funding source of that proposed bill for the audit? Where's the 1.5 million coming from?
They want to take it from the CDA dividends.
So that dividend belongs to CUC?
And that's what we're contributing,
Yeah.
which should go to infrastructures.
So instead of that dividend benefiting CUC, we're just gonna,
It's gonna go for everything. It's still ratepayers' money. They say it's not gonna affect ratepayers, but it is ratepayers' money. Because the money that they're proposing is gonna fund it is coming from the payments CUC make for dividends, which is intended for infrastructure,
for CUC.
for overall CNMI, I believe. But if CUC has capital projects, that project can can reduce the dividends we pay.
So the House appropriates that amount, that,
Well, the last 3 appropriation calls, yeah, the legislature appropriates that
can,
money.
to whatever they want?
Well, that's another discussion in terms of,
Yeah.
the last appropriation was used for the 25% of retirees, which there was a question as to whether it could be based upon the fact that it should go to infrastructure. But, that's out of our, jurisdiction, and we'll let them deal with that. But all we're saying is,
Interesting.
we have put that on the table, that if we could take that money, we can't, we have to pay it. So we pay it, then we ask the legislature if they could then appropriate it for the
Appropriate it.
purchase of generators.
Or
And then,
fuel, or whatever, for
exactly.
CUC.
So then that way we could.
For the ratepayers.
Exactly. It's really that simple. But unfortunately, we haven't gotten any response to those requests.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure if the legislators will be happy with this, but we have 29 House and Senate ranked members. If they had promised their subsistence allowance of 5,000 just for 1 month to help CUC with this situation, because it involves all the 3 islands, they would have contributed $1.4 million to our problem again. So that's another topic.
Right. And guys, it all boils down to one thing. We do what's in our authority to do, and we just exhaust our options. And then after that, we request from the legislature or the administration options that we believe could help with the ratepayers. Not necessarily CUC. We're just the conduit, right? It's actually the ratepayers. Everybody else says that they're protecting the ratepayers, but in all honesty, how do you protect the ratepayers when you bring us to the brink of collapse, which then there's not going to be any more power? How are you protecting the ratepayers when we slow down the whole recovery process? But anyway, that's for another debate, and I'm sure we will have that debate, and I'm sure it'll be debated on social media. So we'll see how that unfolds. But at this point, any other questions or concerns regarding the Chief Financial Officer report? I think we pretty much understand where we're at. I think Betty did an excellent job conveying this and outlining it for the Senate. We all know that the Senate understands it, and let's just hope that their colleagues in the House will understand this specific issue, right? Again, if they want to later come in and figure out how to audit us, that's their prerogative, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you pass a law to audit us, we'll get audited. There's no problems with that.
But at your expense.
Well,
not
see,
at
so
CUC's
Miranda,
expense.
that's the problem, the expense, right? They're saying, CUC, why don't you do the audit? Well, it's gonna cost money, right? And if we did, we're gonna make the ratepayers pay. In fact, our situation right now financially is that we cannot do it internally. So if we were gonna do it, we would have to petition CPUC for a special rate. Now, if our public wants that, if Mr. Benson wants that, tell us. And we'll put together a petition and we'll ask CPUC to allow us to petition the ratepayers for $1.5 million. Now, they want it yesterday, so we're gonna need to collect it immediately. So I don't know what the number comes out to. What, another 10, 20 cents per kilowatt hour for our people?
To pay for the audit.
Because someone has to pay for it, right? And we know we can't do it internally. So, you know, it's funny that how people like to talk about the front end of the conversation and then the back end, they just leave it out there hanging.
Right,
But if we're gonna do it, CPUC, if you're willing to do a special rate, then let us know. You know, Dale, if you want to lobby for a special rate, then write me a letter and say that you, representing the community, wants to lobby for a special rate for us to fund an audit at 1.5 million, because that's what the House is saying that they need. And I'll request the board to approve a petition to CPUC to do a special rate. I don't think our people want it.
Just to satisfy their concerns.
I mean, you know, there's money for that, but there's no
But
money
anyway,
for
I
restoration.
think we're getting off topic. So let's go ahead and let
I do want
Betty.
to close out. I wanted to just put on the table with the board that the director and I had talked about. I mean, we sat and we brainstormed and we talked about, you know, it's not the time right now to start putting funds in a restricted account. But if we're not going to get any help in the future, we really seriously need to think about a disaster is a Commonwealth-wide issue. And so we need to think about including in our rates maybe even half a penny or 1 penny, you know, per kilowatt hour to put in a restricted account so that in the future when we have disasters, we have the funds readily available to address these significantly huge obligations to restore the CNMI. And it will take a while to build up, but at 1 cent per kilowatt hour, we're talking about $210,000 a month. You know,
Toward a disaster relief fund?
So
Yes.
you know, this is a good point, because
Yes.
what Betty's basically saying is, again, we are asked all the time, you know, why don't you guys have reserve polls? Why don't you guys have reserve this, right? And the only way we're going to do that is to set up a reserve account. But again, internally with our current cash flow, it's impossible. So if Betty, you want to make a maybe on a special meeting, or I agree with you. I mean, and I agree with we should have an
Definitely.
emergency
we
fund.
cannot be in this predicament
Right.
again, and I feel for those 4,000 customers. So we thought of getting our consultant to start that petition, and then we present it to the board. And
Oh
we'll
yeah,
see.
let's do it. Leche back-to-back super typhoons.
Yeah.
This is unheard of.
For 1,000 kilowatt hour user, it would be a $10 increase. Yeah. And so 500 kilowatt hour user, which is the lower income, are usually 500 less. It's $5.
And they've been
But-
recommending that.
Oh, they've been recommending that
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, in all honesty, I agree. We should have an emergency fund so then we could act immediately. Again, nobody ever talks about the funding. So again, we only could do what's within our authority or within our control.
Yeah.
And the only thing we can do within our control is to petition for rate increases. And then everybody is going to get pissed off. But, I mean, you got to weigh the two.
Yeah.
You get pissed off that they don't get their power up in time because we have to wait for the purchase of all
Right.
these materials. Or we slowly build up the fund.
You know, and then when FEMA reimburses, then we restore back
Right.
what we borrowed from that account. So at some point, we can no longer make the rate effective when we've reached an amount that we feel
Right.
is comfortable. And that would include something for water, maybe half a cent or something like that. But either way, we'll work something out.
So absolutely, Betty, let's write something out.
Okay.
And then let's present it. And I know that, you know, obviously we're trying to put together a fund for future typhoons. If you want to present it at the next board meeting, then we could do that. Or if you want to call a special meeting, just let us know so we could get the process going. Because it's not going to be a quick process. We do have to take it to CPUC for them to vet it and approve it.
Yes.
But, you know, let's just do what we need to do.
I just want to close out. I wanted to say, unfortunately, many of the challenges that's facing CUC have been compounded by years of legislative mandates, political interference, and restrictions that make it more difficult for the utility to operate in a business-like manner. Even the Office of the Public Auditor has previously identified political interference as a significant obstacle to the utility's success. Constructive oversight is appropriate. Accountability is appropriate. What is not appropriate at this time that's happening during this time of disaster is the repeated use of incomplete facts, misleading statements, and political rhetoric that undermine public confidence in the utility that is working very hard without offering meaningful solutions. Thank you. That's my
Can you email me just that last paragraph? I wanna
It'll be on the paper.
reiterate it word
I-
for word tomorrow morning.
I want to
on
point out
Take It.
something also. There's positions that are not being filled. We have people in different departments that are being cross-trained just to
Cross-utilized.
help with the restoration, and that also helps them with their, experience and whatnot, So where are we gonna cut?
We freezed a lot of our vacancies. We've frozen our vacancies. We have not.
We have customer service down at water. I went there like almost every single day during Sinlaku. So where are we cutting?
They're multitasking, huh?
I have a
Don,
comment.
yes, Don.
I have a comment on the cuts, and also I have a question for Betty while we're on the topic. The bottom line is we've missed tens of millions of dollars in revenue because we have not increased the rate in 12 years. That's the crux to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the rate petition and the 250 questions back and forth. The sooner we get the rates raised where they should be, like milk has gone up in the last 12 years
Yes,
and eggs and
yes.
everything else. Utility is supposed to go up too. Like everywhere else is 5% a year. We haven't gone up at all. So that's tens of millions of dollars. We'd be in a better position today. And
we're being mindful to not impact it at one time. We're doing it over a
Yeah,
spread of
well,
5
I-
years.
I have my feelings about that.
Yeah, I
was
know.
thinking
I'm just
5
saying
years
that that's
would
what the
be
board
okay, but
decided.
now I'm back to the 1 year. Let's
Yeah.
just do it and get it over with.
Okay.
Because we need the money now.
Where are we gonna cut?
And
The
being one of
employees haven't even
the
gotten
being
their
one of the
raise.
4,000 customers without power.
Oh,
what,
wow.
What?
Did you hear that? We have a board member that doesn't have power.
What
Since
is-
in law.
And you were,
Since in law.
yeah, he's communicated.
So what is
Didn't
our,
know.
if we don't get the 40 million, what, is it a year that myself and the other 3,999 will be without power? Or is it everybody will be out?
No,
Yep.
in some cases, it was the delay of the materials. So hopefully you just need a transformer or a pole, which is at the port right now. But if you need something else that's still on its way, then it would take a little longer again.
Months and months,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
But that is still our focus. That is still our mission. We're very committed to restoring each and every customer, all 4,000. It is not a question. And that is the reason why we are cutting some hours and meals, is so that we can still focus on restoration tomorrow. And so we're stretching it out, but we're trying not to use all our funds right now, so that as funding keeps coming in, we can keep moving along. But that is still our focus. That is still our priority, is to restore every single customer that's without power.
And let me just end on one note, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item. But I feel for our employees, and it kind of gets to the point where this whole situation is, they're paying for it, right? Like Betty just said, we're looking at cutting hours, cutting meals. And I know there was a question on Bobby, and I just want to be clear, because I know there's going to be pushback with the employees. The decision to cut back on those qualified for decision pay came from me. Okay, not from Kevin and not from Betty. I knew that we were in a financial situation that we could not afford another situation like Sinlaku. We just don't have the money. And unfortunately, I asked Kevin and Betty to find a way to activate less people. to take a look at the exempt and to take a look at the administrative staff. Now, it's unfortunate, again, they have to pay for this, you know, they're the innocent party, but what choice did I have? It's either keeping funds for us to pay their regular pay and not being able to allow them to get the rightful recovery pay. But again, you know, I'll take full responsibility for that. And as we start cutting back, you know, I feel for our employees because, again, eventually they're going to feel that, you know, why is it their responsibility to pay for this when we could get this financing option, which will be covered by FEMA, right? So from my standpoint, it really doesn't make any sense, all of the pushback and the opposition to this proposal, given the fact that nobody, like Betty said, no one has come to our aid, and giving us a financing option. But everybody is so willing to stop this process, right, for whatever reason. And, you know, Mr. Benson wants us to explain how we're going to pay for it. Well, we told him how we're going to pay for it, right? And we've said this many times. Now, do I need to go to the 40,000 people in this community and on our islands and explain to each one of them? Well, I'm sorry, I can't do that, right? But again, you know, Kevin and Betty, I apologize if you guys are getting pushback from our employees regarding Bobby and in terms of the activation. And I know, Miranda, I apologize to the people of Rhoda because I know that my decision to pull back on those that could be activated for the recovery possibly will affect, you know, the island that was hurt most. But again, my responsibility is to look at the sustainability of this corporation. And again, unless somebody comes to our aid and figures out a way to help us fund this, you know, I have to do what I think is the right thing to do. So please convey that to the mayor and to the leadership in Rhoda. We're doing everything that we can, but unfortunately the activation for Bobby was not at the same level for the activation for Sinlaku, and it's purely a financial situation.
Chair, no, thank you for mentioning that because they did inquire about that in previous visits down to Rhoda, and I've talked to the staff. I believe Edie was there at one point where I emphasized to the employees that we want to try to sustain their employment. And if this is the only way we have to do to cut down so they can continue having a job, then we have to follow them. Now, if they want so many stuff added onto their salary, then we have to get right down to business and try to cut the personnel. But that is not our main concern now. It's for them to continue having a job to go to.
And you know, unfortunately, the confusion that our employees have is a lot of them know that their time that they use for typhoon recovery is reimbursable. So a lot of them are confused, well, why? But we need to convey to them that it's the upfront cost that we do not have the ability to do. And until that is understood throughout all the stakeholders, we have to do what we can do, which at this point is, you know, cut. And again, and this is why I'm putting it out here, because I know that our employees are probably wondering, and I know that you guys are getting pushback, but just let the employees know that this was the decision from myself to you guys. And you know, I know that you guys lobbied for what you believe is needed to run the recovery, and I agree with everything that you said. But unfortunately, we're in a situation that, you know, our finances dictate what we can actually do, and we just have to work within those parameters.
Here they even asked for deferment, but then back in the years that I've been with the government, and every time there's typhoon, I know employees reported to work, but they couldn't get paid right away because they had to send it to the EOC, or at that time, I'm not sure what is the name.
Yeah.
There's so many.
So Miranda, I'm glad that you brought that up, because
So if there's money, can
Mike,
they
if
be
you're
paid?
willing to comment on this. So before my comments, I asked that situation because you're right. Rightfully, they're needed. They work the recovery. It's justified. We get reimbursed. It's a wash. Unfortunately, we don't have the money. So the question was, and I brought it up, can we defer recovery pay until we have funding available? And then there's some issues that are involved in there, and I'll let Mike comment on that. And then I guess at that point, we decide how we can move forward with that particular issue.
Generally not. You're generally allowed to only make payment deferral arrangements with employees. There's IRS, Internal Revenue Service regulations. It has to be an agreement in writing with the employee before December 31st of the year before the deferment. So we could work this out with employees for the next typhoon that happens next year. Generally, if the salary was earned and it's not timely paid, that's considered wage theft. Generally, the U.S. Department of Labor would not go after it as long as the employee still made minimum wage, but each employee would have a claim against us for a breach of contract. So my advice would be not to defer the payment, at least absent a written waiver from each individual employee saying, just pay me my normal salary and then pay me anything else later. If we were to do that, it would be less likely that they would then sue us individually for their claim. The Department of Labor could consider it wage theft and could dip in and cite us. They're less likely to do that. They may do it just because we're the government and they want to. I don't speak for why the U.S. Department of Labor does what it does or doesn't do what it
But is
doesn't do.
this for exempt also?
Exempt people have no right at all to any of this unless it's pursuant to the recovery pay order, and that is very clear that it's deferential to the executive director, saying that if you work the recovery, you do recovery work, you should be getting this type of pay. However, you're not entitled to it unless you're on the schedule done by the executive director. So I think no exempt employee has, from what I've read of the way the policy looks, there's no expectation of recovery pay unless you're on the schedule from the director. Now, if you were on the schedule of the director before, in the early days of the Sinlaku response and recovery, and you did work the hours and you were exempt, then I believe you are entitled to that per the policy. But going forward, if you're not
But for
on,
deferment, can it be deferred if they were on schedule?
even then, I would not defer it unless there was a written agreement with each individual employee accepting that they would accept the deferment. And even then, I would give them not just the payment, I would give them something more, like an extra day of admin time, or I would change the consideration. I wouldn't just pay them what was deferred. I would have the agreement say we accept the deferral, we will get exactly the money that we should have gotten plus X days of admin or sick leave or whatever it is. And if that's done and that's a bargain for transaction, I believe that for the exempt employees, that would be fine. And to be very clear, I've never heard a single person ask about deferring the payment of the line workers, the non-exempt people. And to be clear, that has never, to my knowledge, been
No, it's not.
under
but-
consideration at all.
But my understanding was that we couldn't defer overtime, but we could defer premium. And so if
You can
if you-
defer premium pay if there's an agreement before December 31st in writing before the year in which.
regardless
it's-
of their status, understand?
Right. Other than that, it's earned when accrued, and the failure to pay it would be wage theft.
I'm the one that's seeing the cash outflow, so I know that it's gonna help any cost savings, any reduction in hours. But I also feel for some of the staff that are not paid much, but because they're exempt status. I feel for them because they're out there with the line crew accompanying them because they're the they're the engineer. And so, but because their status is exempt, they end up not being qualified according to the policy that the director put out. But they continue to work, they continue to show up every day on weekends when they're assigned However, they're not on the schedule, or because of the policy, they're not on the schedule, or they won't get paid. This is a little different, I think, because it's a disaster. It's not a normal, you're exempt and you're required to meet your goals and objectives for the week or for the pay period. They're not, they're salaried, but they meet their goals and objectives. We're asking, I think, for a little bit more beyond that. And I kind of like, you know, I don't know which side to really support. I feel that we're cash poor and we need that savings, but I have a hard time facing these guys, especially when GPA the entire time they're exempt employees, and they have good amount of exempt employees. We're all earning more than what we earn. They get a disaster pay, and then they also get other premiums like night differential. We don't get other premiums. When you get restoration pay,
That's it.
you get nothing else.
And we're paying that.
And we're paying that to GPA, yes. That's what we have to pay GPA. So it became a, you know, morale and disheartening situation because they work on the same team. They work in the same office. And the people that lead also the GPA and guide them what to do is not getting paid and is guiding higher paid employees.
Right.
So it's a morale issue, and it's not something that you could fix unless you literally put it in fairly. And so we've talked to them, we've explained it. They know we're in a cash situation, so they keep saying, well, why do you defer it as long as we know, so that we can tell our family why we're not coming home early when we're every single day and going to
Right.
work at 6 a.m. and going home at 9 p.m. And
So how about this?
so, you know, I'm just sharing the sentiment of the staff who have come to me, and I keep saying,
And Betty, we also need to look at, if it is deferred, how does FEMA look on
Yeah.
that as reimbursable?
It would not be reimbursed until it was actually paid.
Yeah.
and
But will it, when it's actually paid? Or,
I don't know, that may not.
no, you
then
have
be
a window to recover it.
So guys, let's do this. So obviously, and I agree with everything you guys said, right? Mike, is it possible?
I can't answer that because my understanding is that the agreement, the pay thing and the policy had to be done prior to the storm.
Yes.
So since we would be changing, this would be a change that
It wouldn't.
it would not be, any deferred would not be reimbursable.
How would the
I'm
policy
I'm
change?
confident that under my current guidance from the Office of the Attorney General, that
The
would not.
policy is not gonna change. The deferment is just a
well,
decision.
that would be a new policy though, to defer.
Yes.
Can we try to
Can
do
we-
something
can-
for
Can
Well,
we
we're-
entertain, I mean, is there a way for us to entertain deferment of the exempt and the administrative staff that weren't brought on for Bobby? Is there some kind of board action that we could address that? Because, I mean, you don't have to sell the board in terms of fairness. We understand that, right? What somebody has to do is sell us in terms of money,
Yeah.
right? So the question is if the exempt and the administrative is willing to wait it out until we could come to a point where we have sufficient funding, is there a way that we could address it through the board action, that we could defer that particular group? That Kevin would have said, because we know who they are, because they were brought on for Sinlaku. Then they're not brought in for Bobby. And the only reason why they're not is because you can't do the linemen, right? I mean, let's be honest. the people are on the field, but like you said, a lot of the other people are put out in the field. And the exempt people, they're out in the field. But just because they have that one category that allows us to pull back, it's not fair to them. Mike, can you think about that? You don't have to answer us today, but think
And
about
there's-
if there a way for us to carve out the ability to pay the exempt and the administrative staff on a deferred basis. If they sign as a group to say, okay, I accept that, and we capture their hours that they've worked on the typhoon, because it's just fair.
And some are willing to take just a one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying it's something to,
So here's what I want to
but
recommend.
that would be a new policy.
Betty, why don't you put together, Betty and Kevin, put together something that you think will be willing to be acceptable by those two groups, the admin group and the exempt group that we did not bring on for Bobby. Work with Mike to see if there's something that we could craft in terms of a board action to allow these guys to get paid in a deferred basis.
The admin group,
I think
we've
the
allowed
Attorney General, I
them,
work with Tina as well.
And work with Tina and whoever we need to work with.
the admin group, we've allowed overtime.
Oh, we did?
So they're getting paid overtime
Okay.
for every hour they stayed.
It's just
1.5.
exempt.
It's not gonna be reimbursable.
Oh, we'll
Which
we'll
one?
address that
The
when
overtime is reimbursed.
when we deliberate at the board level.
The current overtime for Bobby now, yes, would be, I believe, reimbursable, but anything that new policy that we come with to try and post-state
I don't
for
think
workers for Bobby would definitely not, in my
a
opinion, not be
deferment is a
reimbursable.
premium policy. FEMA is concerned of what is the premium pay policy. If we agree to a deferment and we pay it later, that's not a premium pay policy, that's
So
just
let's
a-
do this.
Yeah. Earning it
Let's
is-
figure out something to present to the board. We could call a special meeting if necessary, talk to PAO and FEMA to figure out what is reimbursable. And even if it's not reimbursable, let's at least bring it to the board for deliberation. If the board says, we cannot absorb that, if it's not reimbursable, then we'll make that decision at that time. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's do the vetting, let's put this policy together, and let's see what we could do to be fair to our exempt and administrative staff that we know we called in for the Bobby, but unfortunately they're,
Do you want to take
yeah,
a break?
big.
It's 2 hours.
Oh, so with that, what time do we have? 11:35. Do you guys want to break for lunch now, or do you want to break for lunch?
Now,
Okay, so let's do this. We will go into recess until 12 o'clock. Are you guys okay with 25 minutes?
Fine.
Okay, to 12 o'clock, and then we'll reconvene, and at that point, we'll start with the legal counsel.